So, what is our place on this planet, really? And how do we even begin to secure our future? Well, these are the huge questions right at the heart of a really powerful political idea, ecologism. Let's dive in and explore what it's all about.
Let's start with these words from Aldo Leopold, one of the early pioneers of ecological thought. This quote, it just gets right to the core of it, doesn't it? It perfectly captures that deep sense of loss and urgency that really drives this whole philosophy. It's not just about science, it's about feeling the impact of what we're doing.
Okay, first things first, let's get something really clear. We're not just talking about ecology, the neutral science of how living things interact. We are diving into ecologism, the political ideology that asks the really tough questions, like what on earth are we going to do about our harmful impact on the planet? But here's where it gets interesting. Ecologism isn't one single unified idea. Oh no, it's more like a battleground of competing visions for how we should relate to nature. And this disagreement right here is the key that unlocks the whole thing. On one side, you've got the ego view. It's human-centered. It's all about us. And on the other, the eco view, which is nature-centered, seeing us as just one small piece of a huge, interconnected puzzle. This fundamental split creates the two main camps of ecologism, what we call shallow and deep green.
So let's just dive right into the deep end, shall we? Let's explore the radical, nature-centered vision of the deep greens.
At the very heart of deep green thinking is this powerful idea, holism. It's this understanding that nature is a complex, interconnected web, where every single thread is vital. This just completely shatters that modern, kind of mechanical view of nature as just some machine we can tinker with and control.
Rachel Carson's groundbreaking book, Silent Spring, gives us a truly haunting example of this. She showed how the pesticide DDT, which was sprayed on elm trees, traveled right up the food chain, from the leaves to the worms to the robins, until suddenly the bird song was gone. It's a tragic and incredibly powerful illustration of holism in action.
So when you see the world this way, as this big interconnected web, it leads you to a pretty radical conclusion: biocentric equality. It's the idea that all forms of life, from you and me to the ants in the ground, have equal intrinsic value. It totally throws out that traditional hierarchy that always puts humans at the very top. Okay, so that was the deep green vision. Now, in stark contrast to that radical thinking, this shallow green approach doesn't call for a total revolution in how we see the world. Instead, it proposes a more pragmatic, human-led reform of the systems we already have.
The big idea here is something called enlightened anthropocentrism. I know, it's a mouthful, but what it really means is it's still about us, but it's a smarter, more long-term version of self-interest. The core idea is that protecting the planet is actually in our own best interest, not just for us now, but for our kids and their kids. We shift from being masters of the earth to being its caretakers.
And you can see this shallow green approach everywhere in the real world, right? It's all about management. It's about using the tools we already have, international agreements, market-based solutions like green capitalism, and government policies, to try and steer us in a greener direction. The goal is to reform the system, not to tear it down.
But hang on a second. What if both the deep and the shallow greens are kind of missing the point? There's a third group, the social ecologists, who argue that the root of the crisis isn't our mindset. It's the very structure of our society.
For eco-socialists, the finger of blame points squarely at one thing: capitalism. They argue that an economic system built on endless growth, on constantly turning everything into a commodity, is inevitably going to plunder a planet with finite resources. From this point of view, green capitalism is a complete contradiction. The enemy isn't humanity, it's the economic system.
Then you have the eco-anarchists, like the influential thinker Murray Bookchin, who take this critique and turn it up to 11. They argue that the problem isn't just capitalism, but any form of hierarchy. The way the state dominates people, they believe, comes from the exact same toxic mindset that leads to us dominating nature. Their solution? To save the planet, we have to abolish the state.
And for eco-feminists, the root of the problem is patriarchy. Thinkers like Carolyn Merchant argue that the historical oppression of women and the exploitation of nature are really just two sides of the same coin. This worldview that objectifies and conquers, they say, is the ultimate enemy of a sustainable future. Okay, so we've got these deep philosophical splits, right? Deep versus shallow, and then all these social critiques. The big question is, how does this all actually play out in the world today? You can really feel the urgency of it all in activists like Greta Thunberg. Her famous blah 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 speech just perfectly voices that core deep green skepticism, that the shallow green managerial approach of conferences and slow reforms has completely failed to deliver the drastic action we need. It's a really powerful critique of the slow pace of change.
And kind of looming over this whole entire debate is a massive, unavoidable reality: exponential population growth. We're talking 2.5 billion people in 1950, jumping to a projected 11.2 billion by the year 2100. This is the challenge that deep green thinkers especially say we just cannot afford to ignore.
So this is absolutely crucial to understand. These different philosophies don't just offer slightly different environmental policies. They are proposing fundamentally different economic futures. Shallow greens want to reform capitalism. Deep greens are advocating for radical new models like Buddhist economics, which focuses on well-being instead of just consumption. And social ecologists? They're calling for a post-capitalist world based on common ownership. The stakes really couldn't be any higher.
And so this brings us back to the central question, the big choice at the heart of ecologism. Is the answer to manage our way out of this crisis through reform and technology and a smarter kind of capitalism? Or does ensuring our common future require a radical revolution in our minds, in our societies, and in our economies? It's a choice between working within the system or building a new one from the ground up.